Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. We've designed this specifically to help you master the Customs Act and rules for your upcoming CMA written exam. I know you've got a massive amount of ground to cover for your test, so my goal today is to cut through the noise, skip the fluff, and give you the highly structured, exam-focused understanding you actually need to ace this.
All right, here is our roadmap for today. We'll be hitting 1, history and constitutional basis, 2, sources of customs law, 3, key definitions for exams, 4, transit versus transshipment, 5, classification and valuation, and finally, 6, types of customs duties. Let's get right into it.
Section 1, History and Constitutional Basis, the Origins of Tax. You know, the collection of customs revenue isn't just some modern bureaucratic invention. It's been around since time immemorial in India. The laws and punishments are literally right there in Kautilya's ancient text, the Arthasastra. But the modern system of taxation, that is entirely a British legacy. If you jump over to 13th century England during the days of King John, customary dues were basically protection money. Yeah, local sheriffs collected it from foreign traders in exchange for police service. Eventually, the British brought a formal system to India with the Sea Customs Act of 1878, followed by the Land Customs Act in 1924. Independent India eventually consolidated everything, repealing those older British-focused enactments to pass the Customs Act of 1962.
Okay, take a mental screenshot of this. Entry 83 of List Cited Schedule 7 of the Constitution is the absolutely crucial backing that empowers the Union government to levy import and export duties. Whenever you write an exam answer about a customs charge, referencing Entry 83, alongside Article 265, which says no tax can be levied without the authority of law, will instantly elevate your response. It shows the examiner you know exactly where the power comes from.
Moving on to Section 2, Sources of Customs Law, the 3 pillars.
For the CMA exam, you absolutely have to keep these distinct in your head. The Customs Act of 1962 gives us the rules of the game. It provides for the levy of duties under Section 12. But the Customs Tariff Act of 1975, that dictates the actual rates you're going to pay. Then you have the rules and regulations, like the valuation rules of 2007 or the baggage rules of 2016, which lay out the precise procedures. So 1962 is the how, and 1975 is the how much.
Section 3, Key Definitions for Exams. Section 2, Masterclass.
Now, what actually counts as goods? It's not just giant shipping containers filled with electronics. Under Section 222, if a question mentions currency, negotiable instruments, or ship stores, you must legally classify them as goods. A very common mistake students make is forgetting that a passenger's baggage, or actually, scratch that, even the vessel or aircraft itself crossing the border, legally constitutes goods under this specific section.
Here is a subtle but massive point for your exams. The moment goods are cleared for home consumption, they officially lose their legal status as imported goods. Why does this matter? Well, because certain customs rules and liabilities only apply to imported goods. Once that clearance order is stamped, they mingle with the mass of domestic goods in India, and their legal treatment completely shifts.
Knowing exactly who the person in charge is becomes legally vital when dealing with conveyances crossing borders. If there's a procedural violation, say a missing import manifest, the Act holds the person in charge accountable. So for a ship, it's the master, for an aircraft, the pilot, and for a train, it's the conductor or guard. Make sure you use these precise terms in your written answers.
Section 4, Transit versus Transshipment, the visual breakdown.
If you always find yourself mixing up transit and transshipment, this is going to be your lifesaver. Let's track the physical movement. Imagine a ship arrives in Mumbai from the USA. Goods marked D stay right where they are, bolted to the deck of that exact same ship, heading onward to Japan. That is transit. Meanwhile, goods B and C are physically unloaded in Mumbai and hoisted onto entirely different vessels heading to Chennai and Sri Lanka. That, my friends, is transshipment.
Make sure you jot down these specific section numbers. Section 53 governs transit and requires the goods to stay on the same conveyance. Section 54 governs transshipment and demands a physical transfer, plus a formal bill of transshipment. In both cases, the proper officer might allow the goods to move without payment of duty, but the paperwork and the physical handling of those containers are legally distinct.
Section 5, Classification and Evaluation, Determining the Price.
So how do we systematically organize all these goods? We use the Harmonized System of Commodity Classification, or HSN. It's an internationally accepted standard.
It guarantees that whether a product arrives from Japan or Germany, it is categorized using the exact same logic across 21 major sections and 98 chapters. It's essentially a giant global filing system for world trade.
Now, linking back to the Customs Tariff Act of 1975, remember that it has two schedules. The first schedule specifies all the import items and their rates, while the second schedule is exclusively for items subject to export duties. Keep it simple in your head. First is in, second is out. It's a quick way to show the examiner you understand the physical layout of the Tariff Act.
When we determine the value of imported goods under Section 114 and the valuation rules of 2007, you gotta memorize this exact hierarchy. This is basically the adoption of the GATT-based valuation system, now called the WTO Valuation Agreement. If the primary transaction value under Rule 3 is rejected, you cannot just jump to whatever method you want. You must proceed strictly down the ladder. Identical goods, then similar, deductive, computed, and finally the residual method.
And finally, Section 6, Types of Customs Duties, Calculating the Charge.
The predominant mode of levy is ad valorem, which simply means the duty is a percentage of the assessable value. But you'll also occasionally see specific duties, which are tied to physical measurements like length or weight, rather than the price tag. And here's a fun little fact for the exam. The government won't even bother collecting the duty if the total amount is under 100 rupees.
Watch out for this classic trap on the CMA exam. If you have a mixed set of goods with different ad valorem rates, the highest single rate applies to everything. So if an imported box contains items taxed at 5%, 10%, and 18% respectively, and they're assessed together as a set, the Customs Act strictly mandates that the entire box gets hit with the 18% rate. Don't let them trick you into averaging it out.
Before we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a provocative thought to test your understanding of Section 9. How exactly does the central government identify and assess a countervailing duty to level the playing field when a foreign product arrives artificially cheap due to a subsidy? Dive into your textbooks to cement that answer.
Let's get right into the exact mechanics of chargeability under Section 12 of the Customs Act. If you are prepping for your CMA written exam, you already know how tricky these legal timelines and definitions can be. So we're going to completely strip away the confusion and drill down into exactly what you need to master.
Okay, let's kick things off with a classic exam trick question to set our baseline. Think about it for a second. When a massive shipment finally hits the port, who does the government actually tax? Do they tax the importer, or do they tax the physical cargo itself? Getting this fundamental concept right forms the absolute bedrock of customs law. Here is our roadmap for today. 1. Chargeability under Section 12. 2. Defining the target, goods. 3. Import and export actions. 4. Identifying the key players. 5. Taxable events for imports. And 6. Taxable events for exports. Let's jump in.
Section 1. Chargeability under Section 12. All right, here is the core rule, the absolute foundation that everything else rests on. Section 12 taxes the physical items, meaning the duty of custom is leviable on the goods, not on the person importing or exporting them. This is absolutely crucial for your exam. If the goods are imported into or exported from India, they attract duty. The tax literally doesn't care whose name is on the clipboard, it's all about the physical object crossing that border.
So where do the actual duty rates come from? Well, Section 12 dictates that duties are levied at rates specified under the Customs Tariff Act of 1975. You've got two specific schedules to lock into your memory here. The first schedule gives you the specific rates for import duty, while the second schedule is for export duty. Keep those two distinctly separated in your mind.
Section 2. Defining the target. Goods. Now that we know the goods bear the tax, what exactly counts as goods legally speaking? Under Section 2, subsection 22, the definition is surprisingly broad. But here's the catch. It exclusively covers movable items. If it's bolted down and can't be moved, customs isn't interested. But the statute goes further than that and gives us a hard-coded list of inclusions you absolutely have to know. You really need to memorize this statutory list. The law specifically includes vessels, aircraft, and vehicles. Yes, the massive things transporting the cargo are legally goods themselves. It also includes stores, which means things like fuel and spare parts, baggage, currency, negotiable instruments, and any other kind of movable property. Currency is a massive trap for students on the written exam, so make sure you remember that one. Section 3. Import and export actions. So we've got our goods. What actually triggers the Customs Act? It's all about crossing that national border. Import, under Section 2, subsection 23, is simply bringing into India from a place outside India. Export, under Section 2, subsection 18, is taking out of India to a place outside India. Sounds super simple, right? But in customs law, precision is everything. That physical movement across the line is the prerequisite for everything else.
Section 4. Identifying the key players.
Next, we have to talk about the who. Even though the tax is on the goods, the government still needs a real person or company to actually hand over the cash. Sections 226 for importers and 220 for exporters contain a classic exam trap. Sure, the actual owner is liable, but the law intentionally casts a giant net to include anyone holding himself out to be the importer or exporter. So, if an agent acts like they are the one importing the goods, customs can absolutely treat them as the importer for collecting the duty.
It goes even further. The law explicitly includes a person who cleared the goods from a warehouse, even if they aren't the actual original importer. Say Company A imports some goods and puts them in a warehouse. Then Company B buys the rights to them and clears them for home consumption. Boom! Company B is now the importer under the law. It ensures the government always has someone on the hook when payment is finally due.
What about the government itself? Generally speaking, the provisions apply to government goods too, but you must remember these specific exemptions for your test. Imports by the Indian Navy, specific police equipment, the Ministry of Defense, and the Coastal Guard are fully exempt. Just remember, these aren't blanket rules. They are subject to the fulfillment of specific conditions set out in notifications.
Section 5. Taxable events for imports. Okay, we've reached the absolute climax of this explainer, the exact taxable event. Examiners go crazy for case law here. You want to cite the 1999 Supreme Court ruling, Garden Silk Mills Limited versus Union of India. This case states that the import of goods commences when they cross the territorial waters, but continues and is completed when they become part of the mass of goods within the country. It's a continuous process, not just a single snapshot in time.
Think about the journey of the goods. Day 1, the ship crosses the territorial waters. The import has commenced. But that's not the taxable event. The taxable event is actually reached when the goods hit the customs barriers and the bill of entry for home consumption is filed. That specific intersection, physical location at the barrier, plus filing the paperwork, that is the exact moment tax liability is locked in.
But what if they don't go straight into the domestic economy? If the goods are cleared for warehousing instead, they stay in a custom bond. That means the payment of duty is entirely deferred. Technically, the import only takes place later, when those goods are finally cleared from the warehouse for home consumption. Keep that distinction sharp.
Section 6. Taxable events for exports.
Finally, let's flip it and look at goods leaving the country. Unlike that drawn-out import process, exports are totally different. The export of goods is complete the exact moment they cross out of the territorial waters. That's the definitive line. Once that invisible maritime border is crossed, the export is legally complete.
This brings us to a brilliant ruling from the Madras High Court in 1985, M. Jamal Co. versus Union of India. This is the perfect philosophical anchor for any essay question. The court said, the object of the act is to tax only those goods which get mixed up with the mass of goods in India. If they never join the economy, taxing them completely defeats the fundamental purpose of the act. Which leaves us with this highly testable scenario. Imagine a ship loaded with export goods leaves the port, but tragically sinks while still inside India's territorial waters. Is the export complete and taxable? Well, based on the strict logic we just covered, the answer is no. Since it never crossed out of the territorial waters, the export isn't complete and no duty is payable. Understanding that exact geographical boundary is what separates a passing grade from a perfect score. Good luck with your exam prep and keep reviewing these core concepts.